February. The poll also finds a majority of Americans say they're willing to accept economic fallout if it helps to stop the invasion. President Biden had said no U.S. troops would be deployed to Ukraine and U.S. fighter jets will not be given to Ukrainian forces over concerns that could be seen as an escalation by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
North Korea has fired another projectile into the sea off its eastern coast. The Japanese Coast Guard says it may have been a ballistic missile. The North has staged several missile tests in recent weeks. Former Boeing test pilot Mark Faulkner has been found not guilty on charges of deceiving federal regulators about a key flight control system on the 737 MAX jetliner, which played a role in 2 deadly crashes. A federal court jury in Fort Worth needed less than 2 hours to reach that verdict. Madeleine Albright, the first woman to lead the U.S. diplomatic corps, has died.
Albright was nominated by President Clinton as Secretary of State in 1996, the first time a woman held that post, and at the time the highest-ranking woman in the history of the U.S. government. In a statement, the former president called Albright an extraordinary human being who knew firsthand that America's policy decisions had the power to make a difference in people's lives around the world. Albright was born in the former Czechoslovakia. Her family fled during World War II and immigrated to the U.S. in 1948. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Madeleine Albright was 84. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Not today, not tomorrow, not any day. Even Saturday and Sunday when Jose and I vanish from the airwaves, much to our chagrin and to yours too, of course. We got all day today and all day tomorrow before we disappear into the fog and friction of talk radio. Okay, so ordinarily I would have a little squib about the Second Amendment right now because I could have made a nice one out of the hearing on the Stand Your Ground bill, except for one thing. It was hijacked by the CRT folks. Perhaps Robert Underwood is somewhere in the background there. You know, Robert Underwood has been teaching critical race theory since did you know that, Jose?
I did not know that.
Since 1972.
That's 49 years.
That's a long
50 years now.
50 years, that's two, yeah, right. I have a hard time with that myself, you know. The 70s were important years for me. Packed up, went to law school, came back, started practicing law. And in some respects, yeah, I know it was a while ago, maybe couple 20 years or so ago. But I added up, 1972 was 50 years ago. It's shocking how fast the time gets away from you.
Very shocking.
And I got to tell you something, Jose, the older you get, the faster it goes. Yeah.
It's Thursday already.
It's already Thursday, yeah. It seemed like just a couple of seconds ago we were gloating over the fact that it was Monday and we had 5 whole days ahead of us. And here we are. Okay, let's go to Demi Cotney, and then I'm going to come back to Mrs. Cruz. Here's what the Daily News tells us today. Our view, when bills are up for debate, participate in the discourse. The legislature on Wednesday held a virtual public hearing on a measure to expand Guam's existing castle doctrine law, more commonly known as the Stand Your Ground Law. Bill 12, introduced by St. Augustine, if not signed into law, would eliminate the requirement to retreat before the use of force in the face of imminent danger for those using the castle doctrine as a legal defense in any place where the victim is allowed to be. Well, I'll give them credit for one thing. They explained something that's not easy of explanation very nicely, briefly and clearly. The right to protect yourself and your loved ones in dangerous situations is understandable. Both proponents and opponents of the measure presented valid arguments and research for and against its passage. From attorneys with the Public Defender Service Corporation to the families of victims killed by those who used the castle doctrine in their defense, many made the effort to appear at the hearing to go down on the record to ensure their voices were heard. Whatever your opinion may be, it's legislative measures like this that test and demonstrate the will of the people to actively participate in building a better community. We can join civic organizations, participate in community cleanup events, and we can make donations to help those in need. But perhaps one of the most important actions we can take is to let our voices be heard in our government. Our responsibility to our community doesn't end with a vote cast on Election Day. It continues because of Election Day. We each have a sacred right to... We way overuse the word sacred here, don't we? Sacred land, sacred tradition, sacred custom, etc. It used to be that you only used the word sacred in connection with the Christian religion. Remember that, Jose? Yeah. Only, yeah. But now it's kind of like adding very in front of a word, you know. Oh, is it sacred? Oh, it's very, very sacred. The sacred right to vote for our leaders and the duty to, at the very least, participate in the legislative part of the government. We urge everyone in our community to take a stand and let your voice be heard on important measures like Bill 12. Your personal story and opinion could be the factor that sways the deciding vote. That is for those senators who decide to vote before the roll is called. So it's a good idea to go to the public hearing. If Amanda Shelton were the only person to show up, skip it. You might as well go have a Coke somewhere. Your testimony will have no bearing on her. She won't make up her mind until the roll is called. Stay informed of the bills coming out of the legislature. Visit GuamLegislature.com to find out more about what measures have been introduced and how they will affect our lives. Reach out to your senator. Submit your testimony. Be a part of the legislative process. Listen to tall tales so you can be informed as to what's going on in your government. That's not what the editorial said, but it's what it should have said. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to give them a blue star on this one. They're of course right. They're accurate. What they say makes sense. Their theory is appropriate. There's a call to action. All of the elements of a real editorial are here. So congratulations, Guam Daily Post. Now that takes the Daily Post up to 78 blue stars. What a total, compared to 262 for the Post and 7 for Candid. All right, I see somebody trying to get into the green room already. Let's see, who is that? I don't recognize that phone number, Jose. Somebody else trying to get in. Somebody got out. Well, if you call and you want to talk to me, you got to talk to Jose. Jose will say, what would you like to talk to Bob about? You tell him, he puts it on my stack here, and I look at it, and I get you on the air as soon as I can. Try to fit you in between the card, the Zemi Kotny, etc. I don't like I like to cut the waiting time down as long as possible. After all, I'm not an MD. But on the other hand, I don't like to interrupt the flow of the program when I'm right in the middle of a card item. So it's kind of a balancing act. The way you time your calls has a lot to do with whether or not I can pick it up, especially if you're off topic. If you're off topic, sometimes the best thing is to wait until we get to Churchill Downs. But I've got Senator Chris Duenas who wants to talk about that editorial right now. So let's hear what Senator Chris Duenas has to say.
Happy day, Your Honor, Senator, Honorable Marine, my favorite talk show host. I predicted in my mind that a blue star was going to happen today on that editorial.
Good call.
And also, you probably could have done a Zemi Kotny today with the Post article, which would definitely not have gotten a blue star, because all the Post article did on this issue, and you might have it on the card, is present a complete one-sided view. And at least the opinion today on Zemi Kotny from the PDN said both sides had compelling arguments, because there was compelling arguments. I wanted to mention something to you, and being Your Honor and being an esteemed lawmaker, one of the arguments I heard consistently from the public defender and others, and I can sympathize with those who feel as though the justice system didn't work for them. There was a mother there who discussed a situation where, not knowing all the facts, but obviously she lost her son, and the castle doctrine was used. Of course, all the details weren't there, but it's heart-wrenching. I mean, anytime anyone loses their child, or we lose anyone that we love, it's difficult. But one thing the argument that I heard consistently, particularly from public defender, that I had maybe just a little bit of trouble with was, yes, there is always a situation whereby when you have a defendant, you have the prosecution, whatever decision is made by the judge or how the law is applied, somebody's not going to feel good about the outcome. But my contribution in terms of my analysis with the testimony from those who were opposed was, you have the law, the application of the law, and the adjudication of cases based on the law. And that really relies on the prosecution, the defense, and the judge in terms of what they end up applying. And I just felt as though the use from the public defender and some others who were trying to say that the castle doctrine, as well as these and this proposed amendment and others on the not duty to retreat, was kind of being laid out as making it as though the law would now, be permissive, if you will. I'm trying to see if my terms can be used correctly here. I don't know that I agreed with that position, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Permissive in terms of permitting what, Chris?
So permissive in terms of saying that this, like, moving the needle in the direction of giving more rights to an individual who would feel as though, or who would not have a duty now to retreat on a perception of their safety, would create a situation where it would be more difficult for the application of the law from the position of the prosecution, or become more of an excuse or more difficult to carry out cases because it would become a situation whereby it would tend to lean towards more, how would you say this?
It would be more defense oriented.
Right.
Well, and of course they're absolutely right. When you expand the parameters of a defense, it tends to favor the defense, and it hampers the prosecution. So, so they're right. Now, this is the public defenders that are coming forward with this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Morrison. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's playing against type then, because you would think that a public defender would say, "Oh boy, one more way we can defend our clients when they come before the court." So,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So let's start out and talk about some general principles. One general principle is this: when the court makes a decision, in fact, when any government official makes a decision, there's something called the presumption of regularity. You start out and you presume that the government did what it was supposed to do in a timely fashion, and if not, then someone has the burden of coming forward and rebutting that presumption. So when we have a full-fledged criminal trial with vigorous prosecution, vigorous defense, and a fair judge, we have to walk away from that and say that justice was done, even though we didn't like the particular result in that case. And that,
right.
I empathized a little bit with the mother whose son was killed by someone who was prosecuted and was able to defend on the basis of the Castle Doctrine. Well, if you apply the presumption of regularity there, the vigorous prosecution, vigorous defense, and fair judge, then obviously her son was an aggressor in a situation where the person that killed her son was in fear of imminent danger. That's the way it works out. So it's too bad that things like that happen, but one could almost assume that Castle Doctrine or no Castle Doctrine, something like that might have happened.
Right.
That would be one way of looking at it. When you come to this idea, well, in a civilized society, let me back up just a second. Capital punishment. I'm opposed to capital punishment. Please don't revoke my conservative ID card, but I am 100% opposed to capital punishment. But if we have it, it can't be executed by folks out on the street who happen to be carrying guns.
Right.
So that's one side of it. On the other side of it, if someone is bringing about an imminent threat, the mere fact of trying to retreat can create a hazard all by itself.
Right.
Somebody pulls a gun, A pulls a gun on B and says, I really don't like what you said yesterday and I'm not going to take it anymore. B turns around and starts to run and A shoots him in the back. Had a duty to retreat, right?
Right.
And whenever this subject comes up, I always mention two things, and that is that if you are the person who is going to rely on the Castle Doctrine, make sure that your activities were governed by fear, not anger.
Yeah, I've heard that one. Exactly. That's very sensible.
And sometimes I hear people talking about it, just off the cuff, probably not a realistic reflection of what they really think, but something along the lines of, I'm packing heat. Anybody gives me a hard time, they'll wish to hell they hadn't. Well, you can't use deadly force because somebody gives you a hard time, because they're rude to you or because they give you the Atan Baba.
Or at least don't post that on Facebook.
Exactly. Or they pull into the parking place. Or they pull into the parking place that you thought should have been yours or something like that. That's kind of the risk that I hope we can minimize as much as possible.
Sure.
On the other hand, if a person acts in a threatening manner, in such a manner that he puts another person in imminent fear of extreme danger, that's the Castle Doctrine.
Yeah, what was also interesting was, I mean, it was an extension, right? At least by virtue of testimony, because when Public Defender Morrison, gave his testimony, both him as well as Phil Tydinko, who is now, I guess, a referee or doing something, doing some work in terms of with the office, but not in a full-time position as a retiree. But the thing is both of them said that this would mirror testimony that they had just against the Castle Doctrine in general. So it just seemed like it was straight away a pattern of we don't believe in this. And then, of course, the majority of the opposition was from the NASW social workers, which, I mean, I wasn't surprised, right? But so I thought it was balanced. I thought Chief Suba, he kind of had the same. I went along, before we were able to make comments or ask questions from the senatorial panel. I kind of went along with his, kind of philosophy, because that's what he kind of was saying was, in terms of what I started with was, the way when an incident happens and the way it travels through the criminal justice system really is something whereby it's going to take a life of its own and do what it does. He didn't believe that this bill and what it's purporting to do would necessarily change that in either direction. It would be simply how the justice system meted out justice at the end of the day. So that was the real kind of balance. Of course, we had Deborah. Oh, I'm going to forget the name now. I'm going to be in trouble. But the individual, another individual testifying who also is an instructor in I think it's Deborah Rages, how to use weapons, and they have a company that does that, and they train individuals. They have a range and the like. So I thought it was very balanced, and but if you read the Post, you wouldn't think so. So, anyways, that was my observation of it, and we'll see how it makes its way through the system. But yeah, it kind of struck me. But there was consistency, and then also Phil Tydinko kind of took issue, as did a lot of senators and others, that our esteemed Attorney General wasn't there either himself or the prosecution. They did have written testimony, but aside from that, it would have been nice if they were there as well.
I've got some breaking news here, Chris. Let's see.
Boy.
Attorney General seeks declaratory judgment on Castle Doctrine.
Wouldn't be a surprise, right?
Well, that's the way the Attorney General, until he has a declaratory judgment in his hands, he wouldn't know how to testify, right?
Exactly. Well, in closing, Your Honor, along the lines of what the opinion in the PDN today called for, next week, Wednesday at 5:30, Resolution 29136 to end the public health emergency will be heard in the legislature at 5:30. I encourage everyone, regardless of your position, that would love to testify in this to please come to the legislature and testify. I hope it's not Zoom. I haven't seen they might be. Hopefully, it's a hybrid, because we'll be in session. That's why it's happening at 5:30. But I know that the Tall Tales international audience might have some.
Yeah, they won't. They can't get there. They can't get there before 6:30.
That's true. But I you know what, Your Honor, I think it's going to be so packed that they'll have plenty of time to testify after 6:30.
Chris, have you heard the rumor that a group is going to organize in front of the legislature at 5:30 and burn their masks at 5:30 in front of the legislature?
I did not, but
then I'll quit spreading it.
But that would definitely be an event that I would participate in.
Yeah. Okay, Chris.
So there we are. Okay, have a great day, Your Honor. I'm going to enjoy the rest of the show.
Good talking to you.
Now you're going to get the EPA involved.
and Ken doesn't care what it is. He doesn't want it to be burned, right? Yeah, you burn your trash somewhere else, not on Guam. Okay, Jose, why don't we take a short break here, and we'll come back to Mrs. Cruz.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY. Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
Okay, here we go. Yesterday, a caller named Mrs. Cruz called up at this part of the program and posed a question for which I... Fasten your seatbelts here, tall tailgaters. Fasten your seatbelts. You may want to record this for posterity. Mrs. Cruz asked a question for which I did not have an answer. Yeah, you know, sometimes we talk about floods in terms of, you know, a really severe flood is something like a 50-year flood or a 100-year flood. You just saw a 50-year event yesterday.
So the first time was 1972?
Yeah, when I misjudged Robert Underwood.
These are crazy coincidences.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So Mrs. Cruz said, bankruptcy. The Archdiocese is going through a bankruptcy. And the Archdiocese is going to sell all kinds of property in order to raise enough cash to pay off the almost 300 people that had been abused by clergy during the Anthony Sablon Apparon era. Mrs. Cruz said, why don't any of the people that did the wrong acts, why don't they have to pay? And it makes pretty good sense. And I'm not a bankruptcy lawyer. I've never declared bankruptcy. I don't even want to declare bankruptcy. I've never represented anyone in a bankruptcy. I know, and I've learned something about bankruptcy because, you know, when you're a lawyer, you get exposed to a lot of stuff, even though it's not in your case. But this is what I was able to ascertain. This is a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A Chapter 11 bankruptcy means that the purpose of the bankruptcy is to keep the enterprise going. The thinking is that if the enterprise is allowed to continue to function, there's a better chance that it could raise some money, and also that the assets that it possesses will be worth more than if the enterprise stops operating. So that's the theory behind a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. A Chapter 7 bankruptcy is called a straight bankruptcy, and a Chapter 7 bankruptcy what happens is that the trustee gathers all of the assets of the bankrupt and pays off the claims, and that's it. And that's not, we're dealing with the 11. So bankruptcies operate like this. If it's a voluntary bankruptcy, the bankrupt, the proposed bankrupt files a petition for bankruptcy at the district court and asks that a trustee be appointed. Sometimes the trustee is what's called a debtor in possession. Instead of a third party, it's a person that is running the bankrupt operation. In our case, that's what we have. Archbishop Apparon is the debtor in possession. He has all of the powers of a trustee in bankruptcy. A trustee in bankruptcy is one of the most powerful animals known to the law. He can run around, put stays on contracts and litigation. grab things. He can claw back assets. He can sell things on and on and on. When the bankruptcy is filed, an automatic stay sets in, which means nobody else can file suit against the bankrupt, and any pending suit is stayed, and it all kind of gets folded into the bankruptcy. The trustee or the debtor in possession marshals the assets of the bankruptcy estate, which includes all tangible and intangible property, intangible property, including claims that the bankruptcy estate might have against someone else. As an example, if someone set fire to the chancery and the arson is caught and the bankruptcy decides to pursue it, the bankruptcy estate has a claim against the arson. That's how it works. Okay, so if the bankruptcy estate, if Archbishop Burns were to pursue any of the priests, including Broyard, if let's say that Broyard had an estate, and of course he doesn't, all he has is his memories. Yeah. If the bankruptcy estate were to pursue any of the miscreants, Anthony Apparon, for example, you run into this problem: vicarious liability and the law of agency. Now, the reason that the church is liable for the things that Broyard and Apparon and all of these other people did is because of something called vicarious liability. And what that means is that when an agent commits a tort, the liability not only rests with the agent, it also goes back to the principal. That's why the church is liable for all of the things that the bad priests and bishops did. Vicarious liability. But because of that agency relationship, the church, or excuse me, the bankrupt, is actually the same person at law as the person that created the mischief. And that's especially true with Anthony Apparon because he was the corporation's soul. So in a sense, for the bankrupt, the trustee in bankruptcy to claim against people that were the agents of the bankrupt is like suing yourself. And ordinarily the law doesn't permit that. Now, of course, there are the 47 exceptions that lawyers bring to everything that they touch, including the menu over at Touray. And what I've given you is just a thumbnail sketch of my understanding of the law on this particular point. Others, I'm sure, know a lot more about it. There are probably lawyers here on the island who have a subspecialty in bankruptcy. It's a really important specialty and a very lucrative specialty. And I'll tell you, someone who made her bones on bankruptcy, that would be Elizabeth Warren. Yeah, she was a top-notch bankruptcy lawyer and a Republican at one time in her life. And it just shows you how things can go downhill for you. So I hope that helps, Mrs. Cruz. Taking a look at the card here, this is what I've got on the card. Obviously, I've got Paul Zerzan versus systemic racism. I've got the Public Law 36-34 showcase. Rose Titano versus Jamela Santos, CRT. And this is the one that ordinarily would have gone in the Second Amendment part of the show, were it not for critical race theory once again rearing its ugly head. Are you listening, Robert? Anthony Chotgoloff versus Tony Sanchez. Anthony is the mayor of Inalahan. Tony has, I think, a plate on his door that says mayor of Jigo. Otherwise, you wouldn't know it. Major League Baseball, actually the American League, versus baseball. Democrats versus Ted Cruz. And this picks up where Ketanji versus CRT left off yesterday. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities versus the Public Utilities Commission. I'm going to see how you rate this item on the card once I've finished it. And then I've got Friedman versus insurance companies. Now, you know, when I've got something on here from Friedman, it's always pretty interesting. And then I've got Andrew Santos versus the Waterworks. And that's a pretty good one if I get to it. If I don't, I'll get to it tomorrow, perhaps put it on the top of the card tomorrow. I do, you know, the programming here is kind of delicate because I know from talking to tailgaters that some of them don't get to listen during work, which seems to me like something the government ought to do. I would think that every government employee has an absolute right to listen to Tall Tales at 1600 every day. Otherwise, how else are they going to know what's going on in their own government? But it's not the law just yet. So I know some folks don't get to listen to Tall Tales until they're in the car driving home. So should I save the really juicy stuff until last? Or should I take it on first so that I don't run out of time before I get to it? Being the host of Tall Tales is not easy stuff, you guys. Not easy at all. Well, if anybody wants to chime in on that, I'm all ears. Let me see what happened to my Facebook here. I seem to have lost it. There I am. Yeah. Let's see who we've got here. We got Shelley Gibson and Lonnie Salas and Josh Kaplinger. How many times does Merrick change his diaper daily? Such a waste of air. Okay. The guy's got a feel for Tall Tales humor, doesn't he? Okay, and then Hoffa Brown. I wonder who this Hoffa Brown is. Do you know, Jose?
Duplicitous guy.
I think the next time I see Colin Clark, I'm going to ask him, hey, Colin, kung tungo si Hoffa Brown? Hadzina Anya I Otrona Anya? Okay, and then I've got Bonnie Suba. Gracious, no answer. Unbelievable. Yeah, I knew that this would be a shocker, you know, that the folks will be talking about this tomorrow, all probably halfway in the next. Hey, you know what? Bob on Tall Tales said that he didn't know the answer to Mrs. Cruz's question. Yeah, really? I heard it with my own ears. Whoa. And, of course, Pam is here. So let's start out with systemic racism. Of course, you know how it goes. Look at the rice in the platter. Anybody who looked at that rice, the one that you see at every fiesta that you've ever been to, and if I asked Hafanu Koloni Hinexa, you'd say Kolot Kahit Nai. But then then the next item on the page would be malalati, because you'd be scolded. It's not orange, it's red rice. So the narrative says it's red rice. Your eyes tell you it's orange rice. So the color of the rice, red, is the narrative. The facts are the actual truth. And, of course, we try to concentrate on the truth here and debunk the narrative every time we get a chance. Nothing I'd rather do. Okay, so going on to 36-34. Today we have the outfit that made it today was the Guam Peels, which stands for Professional Engineers, Architects, and Land Surveyors. And they're going to have a meeting on March 31. And they've got an agenda that includes 1, call to order, 2, review and approval of meeting minutes, 3, EBA report, et cetera, 4, board investigators report, good so far. Old business, A, law, rules, and regulations review continuing. 6, new business. Want to know what the new business is that they're going to discuss? So do I. Can't do that, fellas. If there's no new business, don't put it in the agenda. If there's no new business and you can't overcome the urge to put that in the agenda, put the word none after it, because you're supposed to develop an agenda in sufficient detail to put anyone who reads it on notice as to what's going to be discussed. So if you put new business in there and you don't describe the new business, people are going to think that you're going to discuss something that they don't know about it. And that's the reason for Public Law 36-32. You can't do that. And if you don't understand that, when you have one of your meetings voided or one of your actions voided, like has happened to a couple of government agencies, maybe it will come home to you. Next item on the card is Rose Titano versus Jamela Santos. And you know how people have initials behind their name? Like if you're an engineer, Jose Martinez, PE, professional engineer. John Titano, MD, right? Jeff Johnson, DMS, Doctor of DDS, Doctor of Dental Surgery, right? Lawyers, of course, are different from everybody else. Robert Klitzkie, ESQ, which stands for Esquire, which goes back to the feudal days back in merry old England. A knight who would have a feudal estate would be seconded by his squire, who was kind of like his body man, the guy that kind of helped him onto the horse and cleaned up his tackle and stuff like that. So that's where the esquire comes from. Lawyers started out as helpers for knights and gradually morphed into esquires. But in this situation, Janela Santos, it's Janela Santos CRT, critical race theorists. So it's an article in the Post that Chris talked about, and the Post tells us this is the first in a two-part series that covers Wednesday's public hearing on 12-36. Quote, what's happening that would make you want to push such a law? Agnes Matanani told lawmakers at a public hearing in opposition to a bill that would create a stand your ground provision in Guam law. Matanani's son, Joseph Michael Matanani Zamora, was killed in 2020. The shooter called on the existing castle doctrine in defense, and a murder charged against him was later dropped. Okay. Tell me more. People are using castle doctrine wrong, according to Matanani, who hoped lawmakers would fix the law instead of expanding it. Quote, my son will probably never get the justice he is due. This is harsh. This is hard. But apparently he did get the justice that he was due. We have a judicial system, and unless you want to pick up the CRT brush when the courts rule on something, that's our definition of justice. If we have an adequate defense and a fair judge, whatever and a properly impaneled jury, whatever comes out of it is by definition justice. My son probably will never get the justice he's due, but if you push this law into existence, it will be much easier for people to get away with murder. Yeah. Now, people, once again, use the word murder in a very loose fashion. Killing every time someone kills someone else, it's not murder. You have to get into things like mens rea and actus reus, etc. But if as an example, A is driving his car down the road, and B steps out in front of him, and A doesn't have time to brake and hits B and kills him, A killed B, but it ain't murder. Every time someone dies at the hand of someone else, it's not murder.
We had that tragic case of two buddies getting into a fight over there at that one car dealership at a party.
Yeah.
Punched his friend fell, and then died from the fall.
Yeah.
That wasn't murder.
No, it wasn't. That's right. So, but of course, we're talking about lay people. We're not talking about lawyers. And you know, in common everyday speech, yeah, it was murder. He killed him. And it is a public hearing, so we have to really be tolerant of the language that people use and try very hard to understand what it is that they're trying to say. Going on, Bill 12-36 would expand Guam's castle doctrine into a stand your ground law as seen in some stateside jurisdictions. Makes it automatically bad. Some testified in support of the measure, saying they should be able to defend themselves without fear of prosecution. Others opposed the bill, including members of social work groups. I made up my mind already. They left out the key word, justice, social justice work groups, right? And the Public Defender Service Corporation. Now, I've mentioned this before, but last May I was talking to one of the guys over there at the Public Defender Service Corporation. It's like in the middle of the month, and we were both kind of interested in auto racing. And I said to the public defender, "What do you think of the Indianapolis 500?" And without batting an eye, he said, "I think they're innocent." Public defenders, yeah. The public defender said the bill would only harm abuse victims and minorities. Let's stop there and we'll come back in just a minute.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
Help support those most in need. Team 26 is a civic group of residents on a mission to help Guam's homeless. The Hands Across the Island event is Saturday, March 26th. That'll have members walking mile by mile through many villages to simulate the struggles of our homeless community. You can support them through monetary donations. Docomo Pacific subscribers text the words Team 26 to 4357 or help to make a $10 donation with each text. Other donations can be made at GuamHomelessCoalition.org. Just note Team 26. Team 26. We got your back.
Okay, so picking this article up again, this is where I left off. The public defender said the bill would only harm abuse victims and minorities. So nowadays, if you don't use the word minority, oppressor, oppressed, etc., in papers that you're going to show to somebody else, you're just not doing your job. You have to do that. So the Public Defenders Service Corporation is laying the foundation here for minorities, meaning oppressed, oppressors, people who favor the castle doctrine, obviously are the oppressors, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't need it.
You know, about just really quick, I think I've gotten to a point of fatigue whenever this gets brought up.
Yeah.
That I'm looking at this with a grain of salt. I didn't watch the hearing, but as soon as I see this come up, especially on an island full of minorities, where the police force is, I quote unquote, minorities that they're talking about in this context.
Yeah.
Who are they talking about? You?
Apparently, there are only 8,000 people and this is a Robert Underwood, people that look like me. There are only 8,000 people on this island that look like me.
So is there a narrative, and then we have to fit what we want to say in the narrative?
Exactly. When we say narrative, we don't mean white. When we say minorities, we don't mean white people. That's not what we mean. The fact that there aren't very many of you guys on the island, that doesn't make you a minority, oppressed and oppressor. It really, if you use a word over and over again, it loses its punch. It loses its meaning. Oh, your lunch was so delicious. It reminded me of the supper we had last night. It was so delicious. The food at your place is delicious beyond compare. You know, whenever I think of you, I think of it after a while. You know? And that's where we are with minorities and some of these other words. Going on, under the current castle doctrine, a person is presumed to have held reasonable fear of peril, death, or serious bodily injury when using deadly force in specific circumstances. Bill 12 would allow the use of deadly force if it's believed necessary for protection and one is somewhere they have the right to be. One. So this is only for Siamese twins, apparently. Oh, my bad. Conjoined twins. Regardless of location, current law applies this exemption only in one's home, workplace of work, or vehicle. Attorney Philip Tydenko, a former chief prosecutor, described Bill 12 as granting the right to shoot first and ask questions later. That concern was shared by Jamela Santos. So here we go. Vice President for the Guam chapter of the National Association of Social Workers. Social justice workers. And here we are. That's why I say I would have put this on the Second Amendment part of the show, except that it was invaded by critical race theory in the hands of Jamela Santos, who says people of color have been disproportionately impacted by stand your ground laws. She said, people of color have been disproportionately impacted by stand your ground laws. And while it isn't known how that would translate to Guam, where are we right now? Where was this hearing?
Guam.
Harlem, right?
Obviously.
Yeah. And while it isn't known how this would translate to Guam, there's a risk that what is seen in the States would happen on the island, especially with regard to implicit ethnic and racial biases, Santos said. You know, if I'd have been on the fence on this before, I just made up my mind. Bring it on. Let's have the stand your ground law. And then she goes on to say, our brothers and sisters throughout Micronesia are often stereotyped to exhibit dangerous, aggressive, criminal-like behavior, she added. This is even more imperative when within the past few years, current events in the United States have pushed us to educate ourselves on the impacts of institutional racism, fear, and how deep-rooted stereotypes can lead to violence in our community. What's that applause I hear? Robert Underwood giving her a standing ovation. Very good, Jamela. It's not happening here.
Wrong.
It's not happening here. And no one has said that there's a good chance that it'll happen here, but it's happening there. And it's part of being a social justice warrior. You have to embrace critical race theory. You got to deal with the oppressed and the oppressor. Otherwise, keep it to yourself. So congratulations, Jamela. We'll install you right down there with Tom Shea, who went down with the physician, White Coats for Black Lives Matter, a couple of years ago and made a fool of himself, along with the governor's daughter. I can't remember her last name, Leon Guerrero. Yeah.
And the president of UOG.
And the president of the UOG, yeah, who's still smarting over the systemic racism displayed by Netflix. Or is it the Disney Channel?
It's Disney Channel.
Yeah, the Disney Channel. Disney has really become woke lately. Okay, meanwhile, Rose Titano, this is why this is on the card, is Rose Titano versus Jamela Santos. Rose Titano stated she relies on herself for protection in the event of a threat to herself or loved ones. Police presence is not immediately available or a guarantee, you know, because they gotta keep an eye on the chief's motorcycle after all. Priorities. Taitano said through testimony read out by her daughter. Taitano said current law is not enough as she also checks on her elderly mother and her work includes late-night calls and extended shifts, while her drive to work goes through isolated areas known for criminal activity. Was she driving past the legislature? The reason I support this bill is because what if I'm taking a leisurely walk and I'm approached? What if I've exited the doors of my office and I'm in the parking lot and approached? Regis said, adding her concerns of prosecution and public scrutiny for having to defend herself while also bearing the weight of having taken a life. So, okay, let's break for the big halftime show. I had a caller. Who was the caller, Jose?
There's a caller named Jesse, and hopefully he calls back. I told him at the top of the hour.
Yeah, good.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
An emergency meeting of NATO ministers. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, scheduled to start about 2 hours from now in Brussels.
Concern that Putin won't stop in Ukraine has NATO preparing to send more troops to the eastern flank, Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. Another concern, chemical weapons.
I think it's a real threat.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. analyzed intelligence and that, based on information currently available, the U.S. government assesses that members of Russia's forces have committed war crimes in Ukraine.
Fox's Peter Ducey in Brussels reports the president will also announce additional sanctions today against Russian government officials. And according to National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, more help for the Ukrainians who fled the fighting.
Europe has really stepped up in a huge way, and it's the United States that will be coming with additional commitments on both humanitarian assistance and refugees.
Russia's deputy ambassador to the UN telling Britain's Sky News Moscow has the right to use nuclear weapons if it is threatened by NATO. And despite the withering attacks on Mariupol, claims that Russia is not committing war crimes and reports that, to the contrary, are fake news. The UN General Assembly will vote today on a resolution backed by over 90 countries, blaming Russia for the escalating humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, demanding an immediate halt to hostilities, especially attacks on civilians. Near Ukraine's capital of Kiev, more fighting overnight in a counteroffensive.
It has been going on all night as Ukrainian forces try to drive back the Russians who have been camped about 9 or 10 miles from the city center of Kyiv. Ukrainian forces say that they are having some success forcing the Russian forces back.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in western Ukraine. North Korea has launched another suspected ballistic missile. The Japanese Coast Guard says it may have landed inside Japan's economic exclusion zone. America is listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonmu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
News.
A second day of, at times, contentious questioning Wednesday for Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. But a Fox News poll finds a majority of those asked believe she should be confirmed.
Right now, 56% of Americans would confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court. That percentage is higher than the four most recently named justices, Barrett, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, and Sotomayor. The poll also looks at the midterm elections. Republicans at 52% are more interested in the November election than Democrats at 44%. Evangelical Christians lead the way in Republican support. The usual supporters, Black, Hispanic, and women voters, are there for Democrats, but at lower levels now than in 2018. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
President Biden has ordered flags on federal buildings be lowered to half staff in memory of Madeleine Albright, the first woman to serve as U.S. Secretary of State. She's lost her battle with cancer at the age of 84. The Census Bureau releasing new data that says nearly 3/4 of the counties in the U.S. lost population last year as deaths outnumbered births, largely due to the pandemic. A homeless man accused of shoving a woman into the path of a subway in New York City earlier this year will not stand trial anytime soon.
Martin Simon is accused of fatally shoving a woman into an oncoming subway train. He's been in custody since January following the killing of Michelle Go. Police say she tried to avoid Simon when he approached and attacked. Simon is charged with second-degree murder. A public defender who spoke with Fox News calls Michelle's death a tragedy beyond comprehension. The attorney then went on to say Simon was in the throes of mental illness when he attacked her and will go to a psychiatric hospital until he's stable enough for trial.
Fox's Tom Graham, and I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Always here to help you. This island is our home. Through the years, we've been a friend to the neighbors we have known. Now we're banking on the future. Services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Back at it again with the Lenten season menu with Mezcla, giving you a variety of food you can enjoy and pick from, like the fish tacos, spicy buttered shrimp, parrotfish escabeche, lobster pad capral pasta, crab-crusted Chilean sea bass, and more. There you have options. Offered at Hagåtña location for lunch and dinner only at Mezcla. For reservations, call 671-479-2652. What are you waiting for? Let's go celebrate the Lenten season with Mezcla.
We're already Pica's best radio station, but we're always looking for ways to be even better.
Announcing the point on Alexa.
In addition to our FM and HD radio feeds, our incredible app, informative website, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live, you can now tell Alexa to stream The Point. And your smart speaker will start playing whatever we're saying. News and views 24/7 with your 4-word command. Alexa, stream The Point.
Another great halftime show, probably the best halftime show anywhere in the Western Pacific, if not in the entire Pacific Basin. So we're back here in Tall Tales, second half of Tall Tales. We got another hour here to go and all day tomorrow before Jose and I turn into pumpkins. Back on the hearing for the Stand Your Ground bill, and we heard from some people who were opposed to the bill, and Negative comment on that rages. Here's what I mean. Deborah rages. Negative comment rages. Here's what I mean by that, Jose. Deborah rages, said Bill 12 is not a gun law, but about the right to defend yourself. The reason why I support this bill is because of what if I'm taking a leisurely walk and I'm approached? What if I've exited the doors of my office and I'm in a parking lot and approached? Rages said, adding her concerns of prosecution and public scrutiny for having to defend herself while also bearing the weight of having taken a life. Morrison stated his testimony that self-defense as it currently exists has been a viable defense that worked in a majority of cases. It, quote, is based on common sense, and it's a justification defense. When it's truly justified, we don't really need additional standalone piece of legislation to codify it, Morrison said. Well, I've got a comment. I got to weigh in here on some of this stuff. First of all, you know, people think, well, we've got the police department. Aren't they supposed to help us? Well, no, believe it or not. It's not the job of the cops on the beat to protect you. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case that's pretty old by now, probably 35, 40 years old, called DeShaney versus Winnebago County. And it holds that the only time that law enforcement has a duty to protect you and look out for your safety is if you're in custody. Not if you're just out walking down the street minding your own business, not jaywalking, etc. And given, you know, some of the lawlessness that occurs on this island, we had our good friend Dr. Poole call yesterday and tell us about a friend of his that was just brutally stabbed to death. And we don't know the circumstances, etc. We know that we don't have enough. Even the police department says we ain't got enough cops here to do the job. So what it really comes down to is this: if you're concerned about your safety, the only person you can really rely on to protect you is yourself. And as Deborah Regis says, if she's protecting herself and she's in this situation where she's not in her car, not at her job, or not at home, and she feels an imminent threat of bodily harm or death, and she uses a firearm to protect herself, she doesn't want to have to go through a criminal trial and go bear up under all that stress. So with the stand-alone doctrine, it's very possible that under the right circumstances, a case like that would never go to trial. So it's a touchy one. I don't like the idea. I talked earlier about capital punishment, and I don't like to see, you know, a guy out on the street with a pistol executing someone, bringing capital punishment to our island. On the other hand, I do go along with the idea that no one should be in a situation where he can't, and you notice I didn't say they, people shouldn't be in positions where they can't defend themselves without fearing of winding up in the Crossbar Hotel. Well, I've said my piece. I've got Drive-Through Jack, who probably has a question. Does the Castle Doctrine apply? Does the Stand Your Ground Doctrine apply when I'm in the drive-thru at McDonald's waiting for my supper? I got a feeling that's Jack's question. And then we've got our Keith, who's always right to the point, but very sharp and very probing. So starting out, you got a some theme music here for the caller, Jose? You're playing your song, Jack.
And yes, it is, and it's Lenten season, so it's just so I don't confuse myself. I eat fish every day, and yeah, happy Lent to everybody, because it's the resurrection we Catholics look forward to, not the crucifixion. But I called because there's a little bit of a disturbing results, I should say, I'm getting from friends who are green card holders and would like to apply for a gun license here in Guam and are being turned away because they are green card holders. And I said, wait a second, that doesn't sound right. And then sure enough, when I looked at the application, yeah, it says only naturalized certificate and must be a U.S. citizen. And I was just wondering if you could opine on why on Guam green card holders cannot obtain a gun license or a gun permit.
I'll give you an educated guess, Jack. You know, our much of what we now recognize as our law goes back to the Naval Administration. And I think that's why we have probably one of the strictest gun control laws in the whole country, because it goes back to the pre-Organic Act Naval Administration. And things like that that are in place just tend to stay in place till some ambitious person comes along and tries to change them. And back in the post-World War II, pre-1950 era, I suppose it made very good sense to the Naval Administration to say you got to be a U.S. citizen to have a firearms, because there were literally thousands of non-immigrant aliens, not green card holders, but aliens on the island. And just for ease of administration, I suspect that the U.S. citizenship requirement was inserted into the law. Up until, I think it was the early 70s, we had a statute on the books that said that if you want to be a teacher, you must be a United States citizen. Now, when it comes to constitutional rights, those things in the Bill of Rights, as a general principle, there isn't much difference between a permanent resident and a U.S. citizen, because if you read those amendments carefully, you'll see that very few of them use the word citizen. They use the word person. Congress will make no law, abridging the freedom of speech or the right of the people to peaceably assemble. A well-regulated militia being necessary to security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, etc. The Fourth Amendment, the right of people to be secure. Fifth Amendment, no person shall be held to answer to a capital or otherwise. So most of what you read in the Constitution talks about person or people, not U.S. citizen. There are some. So my suspicion is that probably the constitutional law on the books is that the government cannot discriminate against a permanent resident when it comes to the issuance of firearms IDs. But until somebody challenges it, or somebody over at the legislature changes the law, that's kind of the way it's going to work out. As far as the legislature, I don't see any good politics in someone coming forward to change the law, because, you know, the one thing about permanent residents is they can't vote. So, you know, you could please every single one of the permanent residents, and that's not going to increase your vote total. So I'm not cared about that, Jack. I'm saying politics. There aren't any good politics for someone at the legislature to come forward and say, let's change that law so that permanent residents can get firearms IDs. So until someone challenges it, it's probably going to be the way it is.
Yeah, unfortunately, green card holders pay taxes too. A lot of them own businesses. And because of the things that transpired, like what happened across that gas station.
Jack, let's stay on the topic, okay? I understand. I completely understand. But you asked a question, I gave you an answer to the question. So, do you have another question?
Oh, so you have no problem with the law then?
Yeah, I do. But the law is the law until somebody comes along to change it. And it's not going to be me. I don't think it's going to be you. And I don't think it's going to be anybody over at the legislature for the reasons that I just mentioned. We don't have something like the American civil liberties here. And even if we did, they wouldn't care about this. because it doesn't have anything to do with abortion or transgenders or anything like that. So I don't see unless maybe one of the ethnic associations could get behind that and raise the funds to bring about a challenge.
Yeah, so, my final thoughts is that, let's have some prayers for Justice Thomas. He's been hospitalized, and so we should send our best wishes to him and prayers out to him. So
agreed.
Yeah, so that's about it. I just hope that, someone would change the law to allow business holders, especially green card holders who own businesses, to possess a firearm to at least defend their store and their livelihood. That's about it.
Okay, Jack. Always a pleasure talking to you. Okay, let's see. We've got our Keith and somebody else holding on here. I guess Jesse's back. I'm going to take our Keith, Jesse. Ordinarily, I'd put you on first because, you didn't make the cut at the end of the first hour. However, our Keith is as succinct and brief as anyone could be, so I don't want to make him wait. Afternoon, our Keith.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I try to be succinct. I abide by the, what's that expression about the best humor being, minimal? I forget how it goes. Anyway, with this particular subject, I could actually go on for quite a while, but I will keep it brief. First observation, it's cliched, but it's true, that when seconds count, police are only minutes away. With the increase in crime, do you really want to be at the mercy of someone else getting there on time? I don't. Secondly, is not defending one's life a basic human right? I would think so.
Well, here on Tall Tales, whenever I hear the word human rights, I wonder if it's time for me to make a head call. Because that's the rubric for the left when they come out with really outrageous stuff that has no constitutional footing whatsoever. They want to tell you, well, it's a human right. And I'm not quite sure what the source of human rights is or exactly what that phrase means, but I would say that it's human nature. The two strongest urges for these mammals that we call Homo sapiens, first is self-preservation, and second is propagation of the race. At least it used to be. I'm not so sure anymore.
Okay, your point's well taken. Your point's well taken. In regards to the opposition, there seems to be an awful lot of social workers and such. I think that identifies part of the problem. If we were to cut out half the social workers and change those positions over to the police department, I don't think we'd be dealing with the problem that we have.
Keith, haven't you heard? You got it backwards. Defund the police. Hire more social. Look how well it worked in Seattle and Portland, man.
Wrong. Yeah. The woman I didn't catch her name, whose son was killed, apparently threatening or assaulting somebody else. It's a shame that she lost her child, and this is going to sound really callous. Sorry. Perhaps if he wasn't a thug, perhaps if she'd have been a better parent, this problem wouldn't have arisen. And with the concerns about it affecting affecting POC disproportionately on the mainland, I know that's a very common claim. I don't really know if there's any truth to it. It's just one of those things that's said. And I'm going to say something else that's very impolitic. Let's just say for a moment that it is. The assumption there is that, or rather not assumption, that doesn't even bring into the conversation the idea of whether or not the person who was on the receiving end of the castle doctrine was doing something wrong. All it is too many POCs are affected by it. Well, were too many POCs involved in crime? I know that's not a popular question to ask, but I do think it needs to be asked. And lastly, of course, this brings up the critical race theory and this disproportionate effect on POC, and not sure how it would relate to Guam. As you indicated, Caucasians are, a very small percentage of the population. Hispanics and African Americans are even smaller. And while I'm not familiar with every single solitary position in Guam, I personally don't know of a single Caucasian within 30 yards of a position of power. So exactly how are we going to institutionalize racism? Doesn't that have to come from a position of power?
It's all about oppressors and oppressed, Keith.
I never learned that in school.
No, I didn't either. And I'm still kind of a slow learner.
And just as a final note, this particular subject is a hot topic for me. I was assaulted some decades back, and as a result of a carjacking, and I was left partially disabled as a result of it. Had I had an opportunity, at the time I was living in a place that did not have a castle doctrine, if I had that opportunity, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in today. And things might have been quite different. So I really have a hard time ginning up any sympathy for someone who's on the receiving end of a castle doctrine bullet. Sorry. I guess that's my piece.
Well, as usual, Keith, well put, well stated, and a very valuable addition to Tall Tales today. So valuable that I think we're going to have to stretch a little bit. We're going to go to Wrigley Field for the 7th inning stretch, and when we come back, the first batter in Wrigley Field is going to be Jesse, and Bonnie's in the on-deck circle, so she'll follow Jesse to the plate.
Excellent. The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Half a day. This is Jade Uggan from Security Title, and in celebration of Tomorrow Month, here is a tip on dealing with your land. You might be thinking of giving part of your property to your child or another family member. Once you have subdivided the property and recorded the map, you will also need to record the deed transferring the title. Just drawing the map is not enough to make sure they actually own the land. Protehi I Tanonu. When it comes to your family land, call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Okay, here we are. I've got Jesse, and then after Jesse, I've got Bonnie. Both want to talk about the castle doctrine. So go ahead, Jesse, lay it on me.
Ginning up any sympathy for someone who's on the receiving end of a castle doctrine.
Hello?
I guess that's my piece.
Hello?
Yeah, hello. Go ahead. Hello. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the castle doctrine thing, I think, that obviously that's coming on and it's already a law, but I just, it's just unnecessary anyways because, if we're talking about firearms, I mean, you're already, the Constitution gives you the right to carry, and then you're registered, people can register and conceal carry on island, so I mean, this law just seems another unnecessary thing, and then to the point of the last caller saying that, that was some harsh words because the case was dismissed without prejudice, so there's a chance that they could try it again, and there was there's a lot of stuff that went on in there that hasn't all come out, so and I just pray for the families and I hope that they find comfort and in their fight for what they perceive as justice. So, but anyways, I just think this law is just unnecessary and it's just ridiculous because if you have the right to defend yourself, I mean, it's not said anywhere in the Constitution about self-defense. But I guess society, we just kind of accepted that, it's human nature to defend yourself. And I guess if you have a good case, then, you're going to have to go to court anyways at some point if somebody ends up dying or getting really, injured, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. Unless you happen to be Teddy Kennedy, but go on. Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, it's just it's just a failure of the people we elected, and this is a result of the failed the public safety, the courts, everybody that's the economy, everything on island is just if people are so anxious and fearful of going for a run or just it's a breakdown of society and it's sad and it's not only happening on Guam, it's happening also in the U.S., so in the States. And, if people feel that way, that they need this law to protect them from going to court, I just don't see, I mean, it doesn't mean, like you said, the layman people, you can't just go out and shoot someone just because I don't believe it just works that way, and it's just going to cause more stuff for our courts that are already overwhelmed, our police, our prison system, everything. It's just, let's just keep it the way it is already, and if not, also repeal the castle doctrine because we just don't need it if you already can carry a firearm legally. It just doesn't make any sense.
Did you testify, Jesse?
No, I didn't, but I did write written testimony. I didn't even know that there was a public hearing until after the fact.
Did you send in written testimony, you said?
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah. So anyways, that's all I wanted to say. I mean, it's just, I just don't, it's kind of confusing. And then with all the stuff that's going on in Guam, I can't see how this is a topic right now. It's just kind of out of left field or, so.
Okay, Jesse, understood.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
Good talking to you. Okay, so, yeah, we still got a little time before we head for Churchill Downs. I've got Bonnie who wants to talk about Stand Your Ground. Go ahead, Bonnie.
Hello, Judge Bob?
Sir, ma'am.
Hey, so I was listening to your show, and I don't know if you remember me, but you used to be the assistant chief to Scambaluri at GPD.
I remember.
And I was just a peon back then.
Oh,
and
Bonnie, I remember you. Yeah, no problem. I remember you. There was no such thing as a peon when Scamby was a chief.
Right. And then I served with the Portland Police in Portland, Oregon, for 15 years. I was a sidekick or whatever they call, like a reserve thing, private security that was commissioned with the police in Portland. And so with this stand your ground law, with the defund the police and all this going on, I actually decided to leave that position due to the fact of the mob rule that was ruling Portland at the time with the riots. If you recall, in the year of 2019 and 2020, the mob rule was the number one thing, and it was destroying the police department and the mayor and everybody else in Portland. And so with this now, in the current situation, I'm living in Vancouver, and we just received a week ago a notice from the county sheriff's department that was saying to the public that they will not answer certain crimes due to the fact that they have shortage of personnel and that the council will not fund them. So there's a certain number of crimes that they won't answer to unless you are an actual injured victim. And so basically, as a former law enforcement, I was telling my neighbors and friends that, hey, now it's about we need to defend ourselves because nobody else is going to come and answer the call. And the crimes that they're talking about is if you have a situation where they're stealing your car or your catalytic converter, because the catalytic converter, that's a high crime rate right now from the cars, is because they have platinum in it, and platinum is running, if you look at the market, at $10,000 an ounce. So they're stealing that out of your car. They're breaking into your car to steal whatever else they can get, and then they're breaking into your home, and then they're doing the snatch and grab in the stores. And we don't have enough police. Even the Clark County sheriffs in Vancouver said they can't respond to these calls. So if you don't have a castle law that says you protect your family and your home, then who do you turn to? Because there is nobody.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying, Bonnie. That's a very good point.
And it's sad because, I mean, I'm trained, you know, as a police officer, I'm trained how to use a firearm and how to figure out things. And I'm very suspicious all the time. I look around, you know, I try to be aware of my area where I'm at. And I try to tell my friends and neighbors, hey, be aware. Get off the phone. Don't walk down the street with the phone in your face. Stop doing this because you just don't know what's going to happen. And if you notice in the national news, you have people that are being attacked just on the sidewalk, just randomly, just somebody punching them out for no reason, because our society has become this way due to a lot of factors. And I'm not necessarily saying of elections. I'm saying a lot of factors. One is inflation. Two is wanting entitlement. Three is going down the road with, we don't want the police. We want a society that's based on socialism. Everybody's equal. You get equal pay. You get, you know, this is the food you're going to eat, and this is how we're going to do it. You know, and let's plug in our cars and get electricity for our cars. I mean, I think, yes, technology is good, but to a point. Let's not rush it. Let's understand it before we reach that decision to make everybody the same. I mean, we're not robots, but I think that's where we're headed. And so that's why I wanted to call in, is that the fact that, yes, stand your ground at this point now, I think is a necessity, because families, you know, people are going to break into their house and take whatever they want and hurt people. And if you don't have that stand your ground rule and the police are defunded and they're not responding, then what do you have? What's your protection? And the Constitution says that we're the Second Amendment, that we're protected by the government that's overreached. You know, I can't quote it exact words. I'm sure you can, Judge Bob, but
a well-regulated militia.
Yes, exactly. And so that's my 2 cents.
Well, Bonnie, you put more than 2 cents in the collection plate here. You probably got 65 or 70 cents coming back in change. So I'm glad you called. Good talking to you after all these years. And I hope you favor us with your voice again sometime. I know you're a regular tailgater, right?
I certainly am, Judge Bob, Uncle Bob.
Okay, Bonnie, good talking to you. So long. Okay, so we got Frenchie on the line next. Frenchie wants to tell us about Stand Your Ground. Boy, everybody wants to get his 2 cents worth in on this one, huh? Or let's see, I guess in Frenchie's case, it wouldn't be 2 cents. It's probably 2 francs, right, Frenchie?
Well, nowadays it's euros, but, I prefer the Swiss francs. It's a lot nicer.
Okay.
Anyhow, talking about Switzerland, everybody has to have their guns at their house, so it's very interesting. Stand your ground, what I was reading in the paper is the typical leftist propaganda about minority people are going to get hurt and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of statistics, and actually one of the few things the FBI does well is keep the statistics on crimes and how things change with different laws and everything. The first states that have enacted Stand Your Ground legislatures, we were bombarded with the same argument, it's going to be a free shootout. We're going to have dead people in the streets and so on and so forth, which, what's the difference? There are already dead people in the street right now. So what's very fascinating is actually Stand Your Ground laws have not seen an increase in cases of shooting. Actually, there was a decrease because I guess criminals do not know if they're going to have to face somebody with a gun that will be willing to defend themselves. Of course, having a gun is the great equalizer for many people, especially women, small people, elderly. If you are facing a large burly guy, that wants to hurt you, and you're a petite woman that's 5'2" or something, like the size of your wife or something, it's a big equalizer. And the fact that when you get old, you cannot run away as fast as you used to when you were young, is quite interesting. There are a lot of cases where you cannot avoid. And some of the states that have the burden of trying to avoid confrontation have gone to Stand Your Ground because of those things. And also, as far as minorities are the ones that are the biggest backers of Stand Your Ground laws because they are the ones that are exposed to the most crimes. And statistics have shown that in states where Stand Your Ground laws have been enacted, minorities have used their Second Amendment right more than in other states. And if you look at where most minority crime victims are in states where you have very strong gun laws. Well, they're not gun laws; they're anti-gun laws. So those are things to consider. And the left is always going to try to play the emotion. I don't remember the exact circumstances of that gentleman that got killed by the guy in his house, but my first question is, what was he doing there in the first place? So this is it. I mean, keep things simple. Look at the statistics that we know. are about, and stop playing on emotions like the left does all the time regarding almost every subject that they are touching. It's always emotions, and very little facts. So look at the facts. Follow the science. This is it for me.
Well, Frenchie, as usual, you hit the nail right on the head, so I really appreciate your calls. How do you say pistol in French?
Pistolet.
Pistolet. Okay. Thank you, Frenchie.
Yeah, actually, pistol comes from the French pistolet and the Italian pistola, right?
So many good things come from the French, right, Frenchie?
Beside the cooking, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Bon appetit, Frenchie. Talk to you later.
Yes, or like they say in Texas, good petit.
There you go. All right, our friend Frenchie. We're going to head for Churchill Downs, but when we get out of Churchill Downs, I've got a caller here, but I don't want to say his name now because I'll have to repeat it after we go to Churchill Downs.
Help support those most in need. Team 26 is a civic group of residents on a mission to help Guam's homeless. The Hands Across the Island event is Saturday, March 26th. That'll have members walking mile by mile through many villages to simulate the struggles of our homeless community. You can support them through monetary donations. Docomo Pacific subscribers text the words Team 26 to 4357 or help to make a $10 donation with each text. Other donations can be made at GuamHomelessCoalition.org. Just note Team 26. Team 26. We got your back.
Okay, so here we are, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky, the home stretch for Tall Tales for another day. I've got just a couple furlongs to the finish line, and then Jose and I are going to have to get out our our handkerchiefs and start mourning because we'll only have one more day left this week at Tall Tales. So I didn't mention your name before we went to Churchill Downs, sir, because I didn't want to have to repeat it after we came back from Churchill Downs. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing great. When I was a police officer, I would carry all the time, and I felt very secure. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't a police officer. And then I felt very naked, and there were actually a few incidents where I wish I had been carrying because people started to act a fool, and it was directed towards me. And it didn't escalate, but it had a very strong potential to. And I really felt the need. So I went and got a concealed license, and I can't show it to anyone because it's concealed. But anyways, so the only issue I have, though, with the castle extension and the stand your ground is how it's going to work, or how it has worked, proven to work here on Guam with the aspect of it having immunity from prosecution. So I have been involved in a few cases, and some of the cases, it doesn't seem like it's being applied evenly. It doesn't seem like it just depends on which prosecutor's lap it falls on or which police officer is handling the case. But anytime someone invokes the castle doctrine or the stand your ground, we've had mixed results. So the only heartburn I have with this, I'm in favor of it. I just want Guam to establish a more or a better way to, I guess, deal with it than leaving it up to just the police and prosecution. Because when a client asserts that and they deny it, then they say, well, then you just have to go to court. And, well, what the heck is the reason for it? It's supposed to be immunity from prosecution, right? But then now you're telling me that, I'm not immune, even though I fit the description. But like I said, it's I guess probably just because it's so new that in different cases it's been I guess applied differently, and there could be explanations for that. But I just, in my view and from my experience, and it's only been a law in Guam for a few years, but I've seen it applied differently depending on, I guess, your social background and so on and so forth. So there just has to be some way to, different jurisdictions deal with it differently. And we just need to look around and see what's out there and adopt something that's good for Guam, because that's something that really, I don't think was a lot of thought was put into it.
Okay, Pete. Coming from the defense standpoint, I would think that you guys perhaps have already started putting together some cases that you could toss into a brief when you're defending somebody in that situation.
Yes, we have. And like I said, we've had a handful of cases, and we've seen it applied differently and differently because what we believe is, a perception that the police have. We think it's based on people's background and history,
which is
not necessarily just dealing with the facts of the particular case.
It doesn't sound very good.
No, it doesn't. But it is what it is. Like anything else that's new, we have to work the bugs out. My only criticism is, like I said, we have to find a better way so that it is equally applied.
Okay, Pete, as usual, you make really good points, and you're a very valuable addition to the Tall Tales think tank here. Good talking to you.
And one last thing I forgot to mention, back when I was carrying, I'm carrying again, but when I was in law enforcement, they said, with all this new MMA fighting and all that stuff, mixed martial arts, aren't you afraid that someone's going to hurt you out there on the street? And I said, no, I have Ching Ching Pao. They have whatever Brazilian jiu-jitsu or whatever. I have Ching Ching Pao. They said, what's Ching Ching Pao? I said, I pull my gun out and I go, Ching Ching Pow.
That's a powerful defense, Pete.
Yeah.
You certainly have a way with words. Thanks a lot for joining the conversation today.
Sam Kebab.
So long. Yeah, that's repeat. So I think we pretty well put a cap on the Stand Your Ground public hearing, unless anybody else want to get in on it now, because I'm going to go to the next topic. If you want to send your message out to the international radio listening audience of Tall Tales, 671 888-8255, 671-888-TALK, and you too can be a tailgater. If not, I'm going to go on to the next item on the card. And here we go. This is Anthony Chargaloff versus Tony Sanchez. And I see the phone ringing just as I start into the next item on the card. So I'll hang on here. Let's see who we got. We got a couple folks want to talk about Stand Your Ground, I guess. We've got, I'm not surprised that Louie's not calling in, yeah. Yeah, Louie, I thought you'd have probably called in a lot earlier. This is right up your alley, isn't it?
Hey, Bob. Nice to talk to you.
So go ahead, Louie.
Yeah, real quick. I've gotten the impression over the last several days that a lot of us that are talking about whether or not we are against or in favor of the expanded capsule doctrine law don't seem to be aware of what Guam law currently says. If you take a look at Title 9, Article 4, Section 7.86, it essentially allows for what the Castle Doctrine Expanded Law purports to accomplish. And if the court interprets that section of the law according to the plain meaning of the words in it, Guam already has the equivalent of a stand your ground law. I'm doing this from memory, but if my memory serves me correct, that section of Guam law says that when faced with deadly lethal force, an individual is allowed to use deadly lethal force to defend themselves and does not have to retreat if they are not completely certain that they can do so with complete safety. Now, it's real interesting that the law says complete safety. It doesn't say with a high degree of safety. It doesn't say with a lot of safety. It says complete safety. And the law also uses the word know. It says the person, unless the person knows, it doesn't say know or should have known. And so if you put all those plain words together, it's real clear. If we're, according to the law, confronted with lethal force and we do not know we can retreat with complete safety, we are allowed to use lethal force without having to retreat. That's the essence of what the expanded Castle Doctrine law says.
That's interesting. So I guess the only way that, imagining a little bit, the only way that you could retreat with complete safety is you're sitting in your car and someone who's maybe 30 yards from you aims his slingshot at you. You put your car in gear and peel away, right? Complete safety.
Well, again, the crucial word in that section of law, in my opinion, is the word know. The person has to know that they can retreat with complete safety. It's not what you know. It's not what another person knows. It's what I know.
So it's a subjective test.
Yes. And so it would seem if you take the plain meaning of words of that part of Title 9 as it's now written, it would seem that the plain meaning of words is the essence of what this expanded Castle Doctrine law seeks to accomplish.
Okay, well, that's interesting, Louis. You cheated. You read the law.
Well, Bob, I remember when you were my boss in DOE, you gave us that wonderful lesson on how to read the law, which is read the law, read it again, and read it for a third time.
Bob's 3 rules of statutory construction, right, Louis?
Yeah, and so it's an interesting read, and the words are pretty plainly written.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad you called up and cleared that up for us. So really, the stand your ground law that we're talking about now is not harmful. If it's anything, it's redundant.
That's correct. Now, again, the issue is whether or not the court would interpret existing law according to the plain meaning of words.
Sure.
To me, that's the crucial issue.
Yeah. Okay, good points, Louis. Thanks for calling.
Sure thing, Bob.
Good
Take
talking
care.
to you. Yeah. Okay, let's see. We got about 4 minutes. I've got Senator Duenas and the most dangerous man in the room, who actually called before you, Chris, and you've ridden the merry-go-round once already. So I'm going to let Kaiser Zoze or Verbal Kint on next, and if there's any time at the end, we'll get you on too, Chris. Go ahead, most dangerous man in the room.
Hey, thank you very much, Bob. Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I've called, a few months ago about the fact that the crimes that the crime phenomenon we're seeing now in the States is a symptom that started in the mid '60s. From the 40s through the 60s, all the social indicators, the social metrics were headed in positive directions for most social groups, especially Black Americans. And in the mid '60s, the Johnson administration put in place the so-called war on poverty, at which we've thrown over $22 trillion since then, and the poverty rate has barely budged. But one of the things it did is that it incentivized the wrong things, such as men abandoning the children that they fathered, and families having too many children in order to capture as much of the government subsidies as possible. And one example of what happened is that in New York City, November 1965, there was an all-night blackout in New York City. Crime actually went down. In July 1977, there was another widespread blackout, and this time there was widespread looting and arson. And this phenomenon of the effect of the welfare state and the disintegration of the nuclear family has been documented by in a best-selling book that Thomas Sowell actually recommends on his recommended reading list called Life at the Bottom, written by a doctor under the pen name Theodore Dalrymple. And he talks about the disintegration of the nuclear family and the resulting crime spree, crime spike that happened because of that, because of the drastic growth in the welfare state. So I just wanted to make that point that what we're seeing is
I got to go, Carl. I'm looking for my sign right now.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, so long. Okay, that's it for today. So let's go, Brandon.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
NATO leaders gathering on Jack Callahan, Fox News, including President Biden for an emergency meeting in Brussels set to begin within the hour.
The president will obviously consult on potential contingencies. The possibility of cyber attacks by Russia against the United States or other allied and partner countries. The possibility of the use of chemical or biological weapons in Ukraine.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the president is also likely to announce new Russian sanctions. While in Ukraine, air raid sirens wailing throughout the night in the capital of Kiev.
Barrages of shelling and loud gunfire rocking the city, striking a shopping mall and a high-rise building. Fires from shelling injuring 4 people, according to Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko. He said 264 civilians have been killed in the capital since war broke out.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt in Lviv. NATO estimates between 7,000 and 15,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in the invasion. Day 3 Wednesday of the Senate's Supreme Court confirmation hearing.
The rule of law depends on Americans' belief in the judicial process and accepting rulings of the courts, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson says.
Not just the Supreme Court, but all of the courts. It's part of the way our process works.
On the third day of her confirmation hearings, Jackson told the Senate Judiciary Committee part of her role as a judge is outreach.
To explain what it is that we do, to inspire hopefully law school students and high school students.
If confirmed, Jackson would be the first black woman to serve as a Supreme Court justice.
Fox's Jared Halprin. North Korea has launched what appears to be a new type of intercontinental ballistic missile, splashing down off Japan's northern coast. America is listening to Fox News.
Connect to Fox News Audio on the Fox News app. Listen to hear your favorite hosts like Brian Kilmeade, Jimmy Fallon, and Guy Benson standing up for what's right, live and via podcast. Just click listen, then swipe right and hear the latest news updates on your time. And scroll down to hear the latest podcasts from Fox News. And it's even easier to listen in the car with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Get programming alerts and notifications. Fox News Audio is on the Fox News app. The voices America trusts. Download it now. from the Fox News Podcasts Network.
I'm Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, and I'm inviting you to join a new conversation with the smartest thinkers out there about the country and where we're going. It's the Ben Domenech Podcast. You can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, FoxNewsPodcast.com, or wherever you download your podcasts. This new show will feature deep dive interviews with newsmakers and some of your favorite Fox News analysts. I hope you'll join me. Subscribe to the Ben Domenech Podcast.
Subscribe and listen now by going to FoxNewsPodcasts.com.
Above the State Department and other federal offices, the American flag is flying at half-staff in memory of a former Secretary of State.
Madeleine Albright's journey in global affairs began as a child refugee, fleeing Nazi and then Soviet-dominated Eastern Europe. Albright's first major role on the world stage came as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations under President Bill Clinton. She broke the State Department's glass ceiling in 1996 when Clinton chose her to be the nation's first female Secretary of State. In addition to public service, Albright served as a role model for women, advising them to act in a more confident manner. Albright's family on Wednesday announced she died of cancer. She was 84 years old. Steve Rappaport, Fox News.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams expected to announce today he is exempting athletes and performers from the city's vaccine mandate. Other government and private sector workers must still be vaccinated. 7 children rushed to the hospital last evening in Hopewell, Virginia, south of Richmond, after overdosing on what police believe were sleeping pills. The children ranging in age from 1 to 7, 2 of the younger victims reported to be in serious condition. Police say there was no adult supervision in the home at the time of the overdoses. The Sweet 16 round of the NCAA basketball tournament tips off today.
The Sweet 16 tips off tonight with the top seed overall Gonzaga taking on 4th seed Arkansas. Both teams back in this round for the second year in a row. Tip-off set for 7:09 p.m. Eastern. They'll face the winner of a later matchup between 3rd